there a place that spots to mind where he's doing the Favre route?
Yeah,
so he's getting shifted out of New York Jets. If he wants to go to the Vikings and really complete the arc, I mean, maybe that's your option. But, I mean, Aaron Rodgers he's not going to have his pick of the litter, but he'll get a couple looks.
Let's look at the teams who need quarterbacks, right? And I know a lot of people might not want to hear this, but does Pete Carroll take a chance on him in Las Vegas?
I could totally see that.
Does Pete Carroll, a veteran head coach, a Super Bowl winning head coach,
with Brady too,
maybe pair up with Aaron Rodgers and go, listen, we understand what happened in New York. That's not happening here. If you want to win, sign up. That's the best case scenario I see is Las Vegas, because Vegas isn't in a situation unless they trade up to draft one of the young quarterbacks. So I would probably say Vegas, Colin.
Vegas makes sense, and whether Tennessee wants to trade down or not from the number one overall pick, which is now being floated around, and whether they will actually want to be trade out of it, which tells you what they think about these top quarterbacks in the draft if they're looking to get out. But, I mean, I see Vegas. I could see somewhere like Tennessee. I mean, there's not as many quarterbacks that are available, and other than him and Kirk Cousins, there's not a lot of and Sam Darnold, of course.
Yep.
There's not a lot of service-level options that can be bridge quarterbacks or guys that you could just live with for a year or two and then move on with your life. But he's got to close his career out somewhere. He is going to get a starting nod because you'd rather him over Kirk Cousins.
Right, and you think with the situation that happened in New York, Colin, he was the one calling the shots. If you think he goes into a situation where he's not that guy and he's just the quarterback and he's there to play quarterback, I think he could probably have some success. I think we're a long way from Aaron Rodgers winning an MVP. But we saw at the end of the year that Rodgers was able to give you something. I do think it has to be a perfect situation. Now, a lot of people have been asking me this question, so I'll answer it. I don't think the Cleveland Browns make sense for Aaron Rodgers just because the state of the franchise, number one, Cleveland is in after the Watson situation and now the Garrett situation. I think it would be too much to bring in Rodgers, but listen, I understand the correlation. They need a bridge quarterback. If Andrew Berry and company aren't going to draft, that's the Browns GM, by the way, if they're not going to draft one of these young quarterbacks and don't believe in one of these young quarterbacks, you're going to have to go somewhere this year because Deshaun Watson's going to be missing time, Colin, and you don't really have a backup at this point either with Jameis Winston not being on the team and under contract right now. So
I mean, did you see what Diana Rossini, the New York Post, put into the news today about the Rodgers? She goes, she put out a report, and she's went after Rodgers all year long. She put out a report saying that the Jets wanted Rodgers to quit the Pat McAfee weekly appearances. Whether this was earlier in the conversations or whatever it may be, apparently that was a topic of conversation that they were unhappy with. Let's call it for what it is, a major distraction a week for your starting quarterback.
I mean, it really
win or
was.
lose. I completely agree. Whether that means that now you got heads kind of pounding at each other a little bit. The Jets are not going to let this fly. He sucks the air out of the room is a term that's thrown around quite a bit when it comes to how he treats or how he's sort of sat amongst within a locker room. So good for her on that article. It sounds like that the distraction part of it, the Jets are going to be done with it, which is the way you got to do it.
Yeah, and if you're put yourself in the Jets' shoes, right? Aaron goes on McAfee every Tuesday. You're holding your breath. You have no idea what he's going to say. And this isn't like a media setting where, all right, guys, we're done taking questions. You could just end the interview if you don't like how things are going. This is Pat McAfee. He's going to say something that might directly indict your franchise.
Yeah.
You know what? But
McAfee, you're not breaking any stories on McAfee. I don't know. But that's the way I view it. It is a vanilla interview. They just let him go.
Kyle, I get that, but at the same time, if he does something stupid, it's like, oh my God, and then your team gets dragged through that. I don't know who wants to sign up for that. I guess the point I was trying to make there is who's going to want to sign up for that? If we could take Diana Rossini for face value, and whatever, who the hell would want to sign up?
You only deal with it if he's winning games. And if he's not winning games, all of a sudden that just becomes a whole lot more of a headache.
Yep.
Because winning heals all.
Nope.
And now all this stuff is being magnified due to them sinking.
Does he go across the river, I think, as they say in New York, and go to the Giants?
I would be blown away if he goes to the Giants. I'd be blown away.
Does that Sheen and Daboll, do they take a chance on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'd be surprised if he stayed in that New York area. But, I mean, a couple places are now an option for him, especially if they're going to be looking outwardly to get him moved or to move on from him generally. He will get a spot if he wants to play. Now, this is if he wants to play. I don't know if he wants to go out that way and go out sort of where they kind of close the door behind him and then all of a sudden it locks on the way out. I don't know if that's the way Rodgers wants to sort of finish his career, but I see both sides. And we have Mike Tannenbaum coming up next. He won't tell us anything, but one thing that was definitely in the conversation was, I guess it was abundantly clear that Rodgers was not going to be involved in any future plans when doing these interviews for the general manager and the head coach.
Colin, I got to butt in here. I'm sorry, but did
shocking.
you say earlier before that he's not going to break any news on McAfee? As if that's all Aaron Rodgers did on McAfee for the entirety of his Jets career and pre-Jets career, because he broke the news he was going to the Jets on McAfee.
Right. But he doesn't, like, I talk about the week in and week out stuff. He doesn't necessarily dissect the team. They just let him give his thoughts on the COVID vaccine, and they let him give his thoughts on, the presidential election. That's the type of
Christian,
thing that Rodgers gives his 2 cents on.
Christian, they're holding their breath every time that guy goes on that show.
Because if something happens in the locker room that wasn't necessarily complimentary of that team, they're kind of worried. I hope we didn't spill the beans, as Mike likes to say. I hope we don't let this get out. And in that environment, you're more likely to open up and be honest and non-PR trained. Mike, you're right on this. Yes, they're holding their breath.
Well, maybe, but can you think of one moment where Rodgers shed light on a Jet situation that should not have come out? I mean, the only thing I can think of is all the stuff that's outward of football. That's where he's outspoken and a bit more vulgar and rated R in terms of what he says.
But you don't think that they want that stuff out there?
I think it's just because it's a distraction. Yeah, he's a distraction. He's in the headlines for the wrong reasons.
Now, Christian, have we missed out on any teams here for Rodgers? I really think that Vegas, maybe the Browns. Like Seattle doesn't need a quarterback. No one in the NFC South. I mean, maybe Carolina, but they have Bryce Young. Minnesota, really? I don't know.
I was going to say, Colin, I don't know if you were just making the joke on the Favre comparison, but Minnesota would be good. I would like Minnesota.
It depends on how they feel about McCarthy. That would be if he wants to end his career exactly split note like Favre, that'd be so bizarre. I mean, it depends on how Minnesota feels about McCarthy. If they like McCarthy, there's no way they go after him.
And hang on, Darnold they could put the franchise tag on Darnold still as well. I mean, guys, I would rather put the and listen, he's going to have to be willing to do that. I'm sure Sam's looking for long term. But, Christian, I think that it's more likely Sam Darnold gets one of those $21 million or whatever, $21.5 million franchise tags.
That's true. The franchise tag will not be $21.5 million. The franchise tag is the top 10% of earners at the position. That is going to be nearly $40 or $50 million.
So it's even more proof to the pudding that I think Sam might be more willing to take the $40 million, play again next year, and maybe try to get. I think it's far-fetched that Rodgers goes to Minnesota.
Same price. Are you taking Darnold over Rodgers right now?
Yes, I probably would.
If I'm Minnesota, I'd probably take Darnold over Rodgers.
Well, and you'll be able to win some games with Darnold, right? I mean, not every season's the same, but you just won 14 games with Sam Darnold?
Yeah, I can't look at that and say that the season would have been all that much different or all that much better if Rodgers was at the helm instead of Darnold. If you want to talk about that playoff game and how poor they were, fine. But the way I view it is I thought any quarterback would have been pounded by the pass rush, both against the Lions and the Rams. So
now, let me ask you this. You would rather take what Darnold gives and has to the organization than what maybe Rodgers would bring in.
I'm under the impression, but we're also forgetting about McCarthy. McCarthy's sitting there. I would be very surprised if they're so not confident in McCarthy, then you sign Darnold. But if they're confident in McCarthy in any sense, why would you let Darnold walk? Bring in Rodgers, who's probably going to be just as expensive if it's only a 1 or 2 year deal, just so you could do the same thing.
Okay.
You might as well get a guy who's comfortable in that system, is a locker room guy that everybody kind of embraces, instead of bringing in the biggest time bomb ever in Aaron Rodgers in terms of how the team is viewed, how the team kind of operates. And somebody's going to take all the spotlight, too. In a Minnesota, that type of market, I mean, he'd be protected. He'd be playing the Packers twice a year. Yeah, there's a story there, but I'm not sure if that's really what the Packers or what the Vikings are interested in. Because think about upside. You're going to win. What are you going to win? 14 games again? Keep Darnold then.
Right.
If it's about winning a Super Bowl and trying to get testing the ceiling, then you got to go with the young guy.
The only team I could talk myself into right now are the Vegas Raiders because of the Pete Carroll factor, and to your point, because of Tom Brady. That's the only